Guys, what's going on? We're talking today. I know it's been confusing. I get it. And I honestly, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for calling. Let's start there. Thank you for calling because if you don't understand something, I prefer you call than screw the whole thing up. It's actually a lot easier than most people are making it out to be, but I understand what the confusion because they keep kind of moving the goalpost a little bit here. So
Yeah.
we're talking about how we're getting paid, and it's pretty simple right now as we go down to two of them. I'm going to reiterate real quick what that NAR settlement did. So everybody thinks that because that NAR settlement happened, everything with commissions has changed. No, it hasn't. Like literally nothing has changed. There's been one change, and that is you cannot advertise commissions in the MLS. Other than that, it's the same rules apply. And the same rules that apply are that you can negotiate your compensation. That's the rules. You can negotiate. There's discount brokerages out there. We'll list your house for $12. Okay. I don't know how they make any money, but that's fine. That you can negotiate how much you're getting paid this entire time. That's what frustrates me with the NAR settlement, but this is not a soapbox. We'll come have beers with me and I'll vent about that. But it really hasn't changed anything. All it did was get those lawyers paid and give us extra paperwork to fill out. But ultimately, everything else is still the same. Now, because of that, a lot of people are like, but it's so confusing with all this because it's different now. It can be different, and it's always been able to be different, but we're so used to doing it one way. And the changes it hadn't really changed. So typically what we do is we say, hey, I'm going to list your house. I'm going to charge you 6% for the listing that house. And when the buyer comes in, I'm going to give that other buyer's 3% of that thing. That is on your representation agreement. That is exactly the same. That's why I did not even pull this up. If you talk to your seller and they say, hey, this is what I want to do, then you can do that exactly the same. Nothing has changed in that. Okay. Now, here's the rub. Here's what you have to think about is when you fill out that representation agreement in that format, if you say, give me 6, I'll give the other broker 3, which is what normally happens, right? You need this form is going to come into play because technically you're not getting the 6%. I'm getting the 6%. Okay. So that's why it says between brokers. Remember, you do not own a single transaction. I don't care how many houses you close this year. Technically, I close that many, which is kind of weird. I get it, but you're representing me. If you notice at the bottom of the listing agreement, it says signing for the broker, right? If you notice that. So you're acting on my behalf, but I'm collecting the 6% technically. Okay. So you got to think about the technicalities of all this. And then their broker, because that other agent can't get paid either, we have to pay brokers. That agent is going to, or that broker is going to send me this compensation agreement saying, hey, are we in agreement that you're going to pay me 3%? Yes or no? Now, the reason why this is necessary is because the old way, for those of y'all that remember, when you put 3% in the MLS, that was binding marketing. If you put 3% in there, it was binding. Like you could go to court and say you put 3% in there. Okay. And it would hold up in court. We can't put it in the MLS anymore. So this is the new binding saying, yes, we agree to 3%. Now, with that being said, this form can and should be sent prior to sending the contract. You should call that agent and say, hey, I'm going to buy this house. Are you offering commission? Yeah, we're offering 3%. Cool. Fill this form out and send it to them. A lot of people don't know you're supposed to do this ahead of time. Susie's in the corner nodding her head like this because she knows you're supposed to do it ahead of time. Most agents, guys, do not know they're supposed to do this ahead of time. They don't have amazing brokers in Susie. Okay. You have an amazing broker in Susie. So this should be done ahead of time. You are just simply binding yourself saying, yes, we agree to pay you 3%. Once again, that's what this is, guys. And by the way, there is a start and end date on this. We will pay you 3% if you can submit an offer in the next 2 days. Right? So what's interesting now is since we do not publish the commission amount, that we can make adjustments along the way. However, you signed a listing agreement that you told your seller, I will give 3% to the other guy. Okay. You can't really change that legally, right? Unless you have an amendment to the listing agreement. Amendment means we're changing it. You're not going to go through and strike it, but you can amend the listing agreement going, hey, this guy lowballed us. And the seller's like, I only want to pay 2% then. Fine, amend the listing agreement and then don't sign this until you get it to how you want it. So this compensation agreement between brokers is sent before we ever get a contract. This is sent before we ever get a contract. Okay. I know it seems weird. Why are you making me tell you how much you're getting paid first? Because now I can write it on the contract. Because now we have documentation. Colin, what if this changes? What if we get through negotiations and we're like, you know what? This whole thing went to hell. I don't want to pay 3% anymore. There is an amendment to the compensation agreement between brokers. There's another form. I can't remember the number. I didn't pull it up, but you can find it. Okay. So there's an amendment to this. This one goes beforehand. But Colin, now on section, so this is the 1 to 4. But Colin, I'm confused because I get that form, but now in section 12, they've added all this nonsense. Okay. I think when people see this, they panic because they don't read it. Okay. It's in 2 places. All of a sudden, there's a new number. Read what it says. So the first one says seller shall pay for all of this. The first one, this is boilerplate stuff. You can't change it. You can't adjust it, right? We're going to pay the seller's loan liability, tax statement certifications, all this stuff. That's all very, very similar, right? Section B, the following amount to be applied to the brokerage fees that the buyer has agreed to pay. The following amount is to be applied to brokerage fees that the buyer has agreed to pay. So maybe the buyer is going to add in some percentages of the sell price. Maybe they're going to add in some money for whatever it is for settlement expenses. Okay. Now, why? Hold on a second. Okay. And then section C right here, guys. This is the old school. Just, I need $10,000 in closing cost. Okay. That's what section C is. But if you look closely at section B, the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that the buyer has agreed to pay. So let's think about that for a minute. When you fill out a buyer's representation agreement, let me see if I can pull one of those up real quick just so I can remind everybody. Sorry, we were looking. Let me pull one of these up real quick. If you look at a buyer's representation agreement, when you come down here, okay, so remember, I'm representing a buyer, and this is the long form one. There's also on the short form. It says, when earned and payable, the client will pay the broker for the buyer. You're going to pay me 3%. You have stated this. This is on the old form. It's on the new form. They just put a box around it. I don't know why they put a box around it, but it was on the last form too. You were telling the buyer, if I don't get paid, you owe me 3%. I'm getting paid 3%. Don't care how it happens. Okay. And that you need to explain it to that manner. Okay. Now, if you want to adjust it, that's up to you guys. Like if you want to say, hey, look, if they only offer 2, we can amend this and I'll make it down to 2%. I won't charge you the 1. That's up to you. Or you can say, hey, I am going to charge you the 1. We do not have a policy at White Line on that. Just whatever commission you collect, you owe me 7% of. Okay. So however you want to negotiate it, you can't. Flat fee of $100. It's my brother, fine. That's up to you if you want to drive around for $100. But this has always been here. So at this point, the buyer has agreed to pay 3%. That already happened when they signed that a month ago. So now when we go look at this form, it's going to make a lot more sense. The following amount applied to the brokerage fees that the buyer has applied for. So the buyer's broker has already agreed, let's say 3%. What this is I'm going to pay the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees. That means the seller, out of their proceeds, will pay the buyer directly 3%. Now, why is this important? That's only if the representation statement says 3%. But if you have a listing agreement where you said, hey, you're going to pay me 6 and I'll pay the other guy 3, you do not fill that section out. You do not need to, because that is the seller paying directly to the buyer, not paying us and then we pay them. What's the difference? Nothing. Okay. When it all comes down to brass tacks, it will all be settled on the title, on the HUD one, right? On the HUD, the final closing statement, all that'll come out in the wash. However, if you get into some weird technicalities and you have a listing agreement that says I'll get paid 6 and pay somebody 3, and you put on this contract that the seller will pay 3%, technically you just obligated your seller to pay 9% commission. They're going to pay 6 to you, 3 to the other guy, and then we're going to pay 3 to that guy. So that guy's going to make 6%. So you should not have both of these. It's one or the other. You technically can have both of them if it's something weird, but whatever. Like you shouldn't. Most scenarios, we should not have that. Okay. Now, maybe you had your representation agreement that says, give me 5%, I'll pay the other guy 2. Let's say that's what you negotiated. If the other guy is like, we have to have 3, you can tell the seller, hey, just pay the extra 1%. I don't know how the deal's set up. It's all going to depend on how you negotiate through this contract. But very simply, guys, either the seller is paying directly, and that should only be the case if you did not, on the buyer's rep agreement, where does it say on here? No, wait, this is the buyer's rep. On the listing agreement, sorry. You should be doing exclusive right to sell. Please, God, if you don't do an exclusive right to sell, let me know. Okay, just call me. I'll explain it. Just don't worry about it. Okay, so when earned and payable, I want 6%. And if another broker is, I'll pay them 3. That's where you put this on the listing. If you leave this part blank, that's fine. You don't have to fill it out. You can say, you're going to pay me 3%, period. We'll negotiate what the other guy's going to pay later, depending on how the offer comes in. Okay. So that's how these forms all kind of work together. I know it's a little, I always, when I started, I got so confused with buyer, seller. For some reason, I had a hard time realizing that. But you have to realize before you even send in a 1-to-4 contract, both the buyer and the seller already have some sort of agreement in place on how I'm getting paid. Now we have this contract and we need to decide if we're filling out a compensation agreement or if we're going to add it into the 1-to-4, because it depends on what these documents say. I'm pretty sure that was confusing. So let's open the floor up to questions. Who's got a question?
I have a question, Colin, Susie.
Susie,
So just to make sure that I understand right, on the if you do your exclusive right to sell and you fill out 5A1 as 6%, which are showing right here, and I'm agreeing as a listing agent to pay the buyer's agent 3%, then I do not need to fill out on the 1-to-4 12C, correct?
That is correct. 12C will not be filled out, but you will need this broker's compensation agreement.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And that, again, should be sent to you prior to the 1-to-4. Because on the 1-to-4 contract, they're going to write 3% at the bottom. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
They can't write 3% at the bottom until you have signed this.
Okay.
They have no right to. And by the way, this is a perfect one. Either I'm going to sign it as the listing broker, or my associate, which is all of y'all, will sign in my stead. So you're just saying, you know, I agree, you're going to pay Colin. So that's, but yes, Susie, you should have this beforehand. And then you send in the contract with 3% on the bottom. If you put 12C in it, you just obligated technically 9% to your seller.
Right. Okay.
Now, more than likely, title will figure it out and all that kind of stuff. But if you get into some kind of brass tacks legal battle, you stated on paper they're paying 9%, and they signed it. So don't be that guy. Any other questions? Or did I explain this so well everybody gets it perfectly the first time?
The compensation agreement between brokers. There's also another one, right? Compensation agreement between seller or something like that. Or is this the only?
No, there's an amendment to the compensation agreement between brokers. That's a separate form. So let's say they send this into you and you sign yes 3%, and then they send you a contract, and the contract 50,000 less and all this kind of stuff, but your buyer wants to take it, but he's like, hey, I don't want to pay 3% anymore. And then you got to go back and negotiate, and then you send an amendment to the compensation agreement between brokers saying, never mind, we're going to do 2% on this transaction.
Okay.
Then you do the amendment afterwards.
Okay.
So guys, I will say this. I know it gets a little bit confusing, but I promise you, if you read it slowly, and I'm not kidding you, I've done this before. I'll take a piece of paper and I'll draw a line down the minute and I'll write buyer, seller, because I always get that kind of confused when I'm reading through a contract. I'm like, they agreed to this. This is how we're working together. Vanessa, what's your question? The live Vanessa.
We are supposed to accept that form when we're representing the seller from the other agent.
Correct. Well, you don't have to accept it, but yes.
Because I know, are they gonna know like they're supposed to, or we're just kind of politely saying, hey, you missed this form?
Yeah.
Yes, you
Don't accept the 1 to 4 until you have an agreement.
did. Hopefully y'all heard what Susie said. Do not accept the 1 to 4. Don't sign it until you get the compensation agreement. That comes first.
On an offer.
Because
On it is.
Also, if you submit the 1 to 4 before you receive the compensation, and this is me because I deal with the title companies as well. Little do y'all know that they contact me. But if they don't have a compensation agreement, they're gonna be based off the 1 to 4. So if it has 3, then that's all, or if it doesn't have anything, then they're not gonna get commission. I just had one agent of ours do that, and she made her buyer pay for the commission.
So
So
what Susie just said is this compensation agreement never hit title. And they put nothing in section 12B. Okay. So that means literally the buyer's agent, you're not getting paid jack. And so when they got all the way through it, now I'm going to be honest with you, my experience so far, title companies don't really understand this either. And they just kind of assume everybody gets 3% unless you say something otherwise. But that's not right. They should be checking all these documents. And guys, like I'm saying, you got to know how to do this, because as soon as you mess this up, you know you're going to end up with some butthead buyer on the other end going, no, you agreed to 9%. And then you got to go between your legs to the seller and be like, I screwed up. Okay. So just be careful with this. If you have questions, call. Susie and I have a firm understanding on this. I researched it. I did all my stuff. I called the TREC legal hotline. By the way, guys, don't be afraid to call the TREC legal hotline. It is free, and they put you on the phone with a lawyer. It's so easy. What does this form mean? What is this? 5 minutes, not hard. Or you can call me or Susie.
So Colin,
right,
there is another compensation agreement between broker and owner.
Right. But
so yeah, I just want to make sure that we're like
So
using
think about,
the right form.
yeah, hold on.
2 that you should be using, form 2402.
Form 2402. What would you say it was?
She's talking about the agreement
Between it's called broker and owner. It's compensation agreement between broker and owner.
Watch this. Let's figure this out. Okay. Between broker and owner, property, all that kind of stuff. Asking price, registration, broker's fee. If owner agrees to sell all or part of this property prospect at the time during the term, owner will pay the broker fee. This is a specialty form. This is more for
I felt like this was the one where if the seller's paying straight out, like when we do fill in that on the 1 to 4, when we have to fill in that 12, whatever you said, because that's the payment for our compensation as a buyer's agent is coming directly from the seller, then that's when we would have to fill this out.
But I think this form has gotten superseded by the 1 to 4, because that form is kind of moot. This one right here, that's what this says. I'm going to pay directly to the seller 3%.
That other form she's talking about, you're right, was.
Yeah, this
came out
this
before
form,
that, actually.
this form, I would only use this form if I was in a weird commercial transaction, but you don't need this for your 1 to 4 anymore, because that's what this does. Section 12B does exactly what that form does.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure that when we're pulling up that form, because I pull up my forms from Zip Forms still. So if somebody's pulling
Oh,
up that
you old
form
school.
that they don't, yeah, that they don't pull up the wrong form and fill out the wrong one.
And that's one of the reasons why we went to jointly, because Zip Form just dumps forms in there. And if a new form comes out, they just put the new form on top of the old one. And so Lofty goes through jointly goes through and puts the newest applicable form every
It
time.
seems like he knows what he's talking about.
And and jointly removes the old one, so please use jointly because, the other ones, they don't update the new
That's
form.
the guy who should
Or
be
you can go on
teaching
to
classes
the
and that shit, not the yay who's doing it.
Hey, somebody mute yourself. Is that Ron? Thanks.
So this form would be when you're listing a property, you still want this compensation form with your one.
No, hold on. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this one more time, but on both sides. Colin's listing a house. I'm gonna tell you what I do is I tell all of my clients, hey, look, they always ask, what happened with the NAR thing? Nothing. It's more paperwork for me. Don't worry about it. Okay. But I do explain it to them. I explain what happened. We can't list the thing in the MLS anymore. Commissions have always been negotiable. However, the standard practice still generally applies. I believe that most of the houses I've dealt with, the general practice of 6 and 3, that still applies. So then on your listing agreement, I'm going to put in 6 and 3. I'm listing the house 6 and 3, 6 and 3. That's how I'm doing it. That's how I'd recommend you do it because it's easy and it's the same thing everybody's done forever. I don't have to change things unless I have to. So now if I'm listing the house and I agreed to pay the other broker 3%, he called me and said, yep, commission's 3%. Then what I need from him is the compensation agreement between brokers. So here's a great example. I have a close personal friend of mine. His name's Phil. He went through a divorce, got remarried. They had 2 houses. He finally wants to sell this house. Very close personal friend of mine. I literally told him, I'm like, hey, look, man, I'll sell your house for 2%. I said, I don't want to obligate you to the other 3 right now until we see how this whole thing shakes out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use section 12B of the contract. So we're going to negotiate the commission for the other person on the fly. I have not pre-agreed with him anything. You're paying me 2%. That's all he's agreed to. Now, whether or not you pay the other person, we'll figure that out in the contract. It's going to become fully negotiable. That, guys, is how commercial deals work. I'm just treating this sell like a commercial deal. So now when he's going to call me and he goes, hey, you offering commission? He said that we're going to negotiate that with the contract. So you do not need to send me the broker's compensation form. You need to send me the 1 to 4 and we're going to analyze it from there. Is everybody tracking with that? So it's kind of an extenuating circumstance, and it's because his house is kind of, he's got solar panels and Connecticut, and he has all these liens against the house and all. So the net number is going to be really important to him, and he's going to be real tight. So it may be 2%, it may be 2.2%, it may be 1.6. I don't know, because I can put any number I want right here. Might be 10% if they offer us $1 million, right? Who knows? But I'm going to negotiate that on the fly, and that's how I do it. Now, if I'm a buyer, a lot of y'all are green, and green people tend to have a lot of buyer clients. I'm going to sign a buyer's representation agreement with my client, and I'm going to say, you owe me 3%. That's me. Maybe you work cheaper. I don't. Okay. You owe me 3%. When I call somebody, I'm like, hey, are you offering commissions? Yes or no? Yeah, we're offering 3%. Are you paying me, or is the seller paying me? That's the next question. Oh, we're going to pay you. We're taking 6, paying you 3. Cool. Then you send them the broker's compensation agreement, because now it's between brokers. It's not between you and the seller. Am I tracking with that? Is that a good example?
Yes.
All right. Any more questions?
I do have a question. So, like builders right now, they're offering like 7% commission and all that, right? What do you do? Like, obviously, like have my buyer rep sign with my buyer. They're like, well, I think I want to go look at new builds. How do we make sure we get that 7%?
There is an amendment to the
Okay.
buyer's representation agreement.
If he does decide to go new build, just get that amendment signed with the new percentage.
Bingo,
Gotcha.
bango.
I know what I was
Yep.
thinking. Okay, cool.
And Vanessa, that was a fantastic question because most people don't do that. They just think that Lennar is going to pay them 9%. No, they're cheap as hell. They will bust you on paperwork. They're
I
going to go,
know.
show me where you said 9% and show me that it was dated prior to you submitting this offer.
Yeah.
They ask for the
They know.
agreement.
They know the game and they know that realtors don't understand this paperwork and they're playing you for a fool. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I'm willing to bet that's why they're doing that. We'll
So,
offer you 58%. And then you're like, did you get the paperwork? Because I know you didn't do it.
oh shoot. So before I even go toward the new bill, just maybe just get that amendment signed beforehand, just to have it already.
Yeah, if we're gonna go look at Lennar houses this weekend and I see they're offering 7%, I'm like, hey, sign this amendment real quick. Just
Yeah.
in case they offer 7, I want to be able to get it from them. And
For sure.
then and then walk around with it. And if they don't like the Lennar house, tear it up and throw it away. You know what I
Gotcha.
mean? Just so that way they know, like, I'm just doing it for this transaction.
That's kind of what I was already thinking. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is Lennar asking you for your buyer's agreement?
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
just, I have a deal with Lennar right now, and they haven't asked me for it.
Wait for
They
it.
will.
Wait for it.
Once it gets closer to closing, they will ask you for it, and if you do not have it, they're not gonna pay you that 7%.
Which I think is crooked as hell because you advertise 7%. And when we advertise, we were forced to pay. They don't have to do it. Why? Because new home builds do not fall under real estate transactions. It's not a TREC thing. It's a personal property. The rule, it's lawless with new builds.
Some builders are even asking before they order the appraisal as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're going to lean on the appraiser to make sure it's probably, they don't want to lose 7% and 4% because the appraisers are jerk.
Base is covered there.
Got it? Everybody feel good? Does everybody feel smarter? It's really not that complicated. It just feels complicated because they keep changing it. But it just feels weird. All right, well, if that's it, I'm going to go get in some trouble. No more questions. I love you all. I'm going to put this on YouTube. If you want to watch it again, please do. It's less than 30 minutes, I think. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your week. If you are Christian, go to church. It's Ash Wednesday. Yeah.
So everybody, when you.
Thank you.
Please fill it out completely.
Oh,
If the contracts are not filled out, or I get emails, to fill it out for y'all, so please make sure y'all fill it out completely. And special provisions, you're not an attorney, please do not change anything on the contract.
ladies and gentlemen, generally a good practice, okay? A general good practice is don't leave a single thing blank. But Colin, there is no exclusions. Then you put in not applicable. Okay, don't leave anything blank because A, that keeps your butt out of trouble and it makes sure they can't modify the document later and all that kind of stuff. So, they just put NAs. If you don't want it, we don't want a second earnest money deposit, not applicable. I don't want a termination opal, not applicable. It works everywhere. But you should have something in every single solitary box. Obviously not both check boxes, but. So yeah, help guys, don't be lazy with your contract because it slows everything down. I don't know about y'all, but I'm sure at some point you've gotten a contract that tangled up, 2 days before closing because you left something off and now you get into an argument with the other realtor about it. You just make sure it's all filled out on the front end.
Make sure you're using the updated forms.
Yeah, use jointly.
Yes.
Don't, guys, I get it. Like I'm not trying to pick on you, Vanessa, but, or I guess you got off, but don't go to somewhere else to get the forms. Use Lofty if at all possible. Jointly. Sorry, good Lord. We have too many LYs. Jointly and Lofty.
Get with me and I can do a training session with you. It's super easy, super convenient, so.
Or they have videos. If you can leave Susie alone and watch a 5-minute video, that'd be sweet. If you have a specific question, yeah. All right, I'm out. Y'all have a great day. Call me if you got any questions.